Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 o'clock, and we have quorum, so I'd like to call the Budget Subcommittee for Etobicoke, East York, and York Consultations meeting to order. I'm John Campbell, Councillor for Ward 4, Etobicoke Centre, and I'm joined by my fellow Budget Committee members, Francis Nunziata, Speaker and Councillor from Ward 11, York South-Weston, Councillor Joel Mihevik, Ward 21, St. Paul's, and the local councillor, Mary Fragadakis, Ward 29, Toronto Danforth. This meeting is one of a series of meetings that are happening across the city to hear public deputations on the 2018 capital and operating budgets. And as usual, this session will be taped, and you will have 5 minutes to speak, after which point in time, and I have a timer here, we don't have an overhead timer. I'll give you a little bit of a nudge when it's at 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes, and then if you could wrap up shortly thereafter, that would be appreciated. Are there any declarations of interest on the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Okay, seeing none, I will start with the first deputant, and that is M.A. Ma. Hi, how are you? Welcome.
Good afternoon. I've had the pleasure of participating on Transform TO's modeling advisory group, but today I'm just here as a resident of East York since you were so kind to come to my neighborhood. I think that most of us who devote significant time working on the daunting issue of climate change have been really inspired by the emerging role that is being played by cities in developing both visionary and pragmatic plans to prevent the worst impacts of climate change. As global population centers, cities generate the most greenhouse gases, so it makes sense that they should step up and take on this role. I'm really proud of the fact that I participated in developing the Transform TO plan, which I believe presents the opportunity to bring us on par with cities like Vancouver and New York, who are a little farther ahead than us in executing their plans. To achieve Toronto's council-mandated greenhouse gas reduction targets and the co-benefits that the plan offers, Council needs to fully fund the Transform TO plan in the 2018 budget. This investment should reflect an acceleration towards achieving the city's 2030 GHG reduction target rather than delaying the start of critical actions outlined in the plan. Toronto's already experiencing the impacts of climate change, and Council must recognize that the cost of inactions will far exceed the costs of implementing this plan. The plan's actions should not be separated into individual business cases that receive piecemeal funding. Rather, the plan must be funded and implemented in its entirety. The full bundle of Transform TO actions will allow us to take advantage of the many benefits the plan has to offer, such as better transit and active transportation options, the creation of good green jobs, health benefits, and poverty reduction. I don't think that we should balk at the fact that we do need some investment in human resources to execute the plan. We know that we need staff to run the programs in order to leverage resources from the provincial and federal governments. Council will need to look at revenue tools to adequately address the growing needs of a city of this size, diversity, and stature in the global community. And this does include resourcing visionary plans like Transform TO and TO Prosperity. This really presents a great opportunity for Toronto to reaffirm its place in the global movement of cities demonstrating climate leadership and establish us as a leader among the C40. I hope that you will champion this important work and fully fund the Transform TO plan in the 2018 operating budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Mihevik?
Yeah, thank you very much. Are you Valerie's daughter?
Sorry?
Are you Valerie's daughter?
I am not.
Okay. So,
Can't own that.
Side question.
That's the end of your question.
No, that's not my real question. If you were, that would have been a good thing, but it's okay. We're spending this year $2.5 million net
right.
on the city side. But you mentioned you support revenue tools. Do you think that there is an appetite in Toronto's public, understanding the critical juncture that we're at in terms of climate change, really to say we have to invest a lot more, maybe not in this year, but in 2019 and beyond, and and knowing that we have to go to our public and say, we're going to either raise property taxes or find another revenue source. Is Toronto ready for that, in your view?
Yeah, I don't want to be flippant about not recognizing that as a challenge. I think, those of us that are out doing a lot of volunteer work in communities, what we're hearing is that people are more open to exploring revenue options, including paying more tax themselves if they feel that the benefits are tangible for the community. So it's also a communications challenge, to be quite honest. And I think that when the tax issue is framed in a really negative way without community benefits, it's perfectly understandable that those paying property taxes will not want to see those rates increase. But I think communicating about this in terms of keeping pace with inflation and the community benefits side, and I think particularly for those who have children and grandchildren, we're really at this tipping point where this generation of kids that are already living, not just sort of abstract future generations, they're the reason why we're doing this now. And I think that really needs to become a stronger part of how we communicate about this. Both our public officials such as yourselves, but those of us who are doing this work.
Thank you. Good answer.
Okay, thank you very much for coming today. Next I have Eli Aaron. Eli Aaron. Oops. Yeah. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. This budget does not address TTC crowding identified on 50 routes. I have experienced the TTC's third busiest bus route on a daily basis for over 8 years. I enjoy taking the TTC, but I don't enjoy having my face pressed against the windshield of the bus. The TTC needs to address crowding now. This could include simply adding service or accelerating the express bus strategy. Using the ridership growth strategy as a reason to allow crowding to continue for another year is only postponing vital investments in the operation of the TTC. In addition, there are $2.7 billion of unfunded TTC projects which must be addressed. As the TTC said to Budget Committee, quote, "We are essentially running out of time as to when we can defer these projects," end quote. The presenters also noted that significant service impacts could begin within 3 years if these projects are not funded. This is very concerning as 1.7 million people rely on the TTC every day. We have heard many times that Council is committed to getting Toronto moving, so I hope that you will ensure these projects are funded. The preliminary city budget leaves $9 million to pay for $41 million of critical Council-approved investments, and that of course doesn't include over $30 billion of Council-approved unfunded capital projects. The numbers don't add up. After 7 consecutive austerity budgets, we can't dig ourselves out of this $32 million hole with more cuts. Council supports and has approved these priorities, so I expect them to be included in the 2018 budget. Why are these programs unfunded? Because Toronto has a revenue problem and a priorities problem. There are many options for raising revenue, as identified in the 2016 KPMG report on revenue tools. There are 6 available options that do not require provincial approval. Considering we've raised TTC fares for 7 years, maybe it's time for drivers to finally shoulder some of the cost of our transportation system. 34% of the capital budget is spent on 3 extremely expensive political projects, while important initiatives are unfunded. You want a capital budget that keeps taxes low and makes important investments? Cancel Smart Track, the mayor's plan to subsidize GO Transit. Tear down the Eastern Gardiner and build the Scarborough LRT. That's $8.5 billion in instant savings. The fact that Council continues to charge the millionaires who reside in some of Canada's wealthiest neighbourhoods the lowest property tax rate in the GTA, while our poverty reduction strategy is unfunded, is not only disgraceful, it is the definition of inequality. Keep in mind, there are over 185,000 people, or now approximately 7% of our city's entire population on the affordable housing waitlist. We have programs to assist the disadvantaged in paying their property taxes, and we need to seriously look at charging higher assessed properties higher tax rates to ensure everyone pays their fair share. Council has committed to ending fatalities on our roads, but a closer look at the transportation budget reveals the road safety plan is $22 million short of being fully funded. $69 million of the council-approved 10-year cycling plan has been excluded from the transportation budget due to funding constraints. So to conclude, I'm asking you to do 4 things. 1, make the necessary investments in the TTC. 2, fund programs you have already committed to. 3, raise the revenue required to do so and cut down on the capital project backlog through new revenue tools and increase property taxes for those who can afford it. 4, finally listen to expert advice and cancel the 3 big-ticket projects that will see the city waste nearly $8.5 billion at a time when resources are stretched so thin. The bottom line is we cannot slash departments year after year and hope that all the city's priorities will fund themselves. We can't build the city we want without paying for it. Thank you.
Thank you. The questions, Councillor Mihevik?
Yes, I'm wondering on the issue of crowding. It is not on our list of the $41 million that you mentioned. I'm not sure if you're aware the crowding issue is not even on that list.
I understand, yes. It's part of the TTC budget, but it wasn't included in the TTC budget because it couldn't increase more than the rate of inflation, I believe.
Yeah. So tell us what additional buses would mean for you. How often do you have to skip a bus or get crowded in there? Is it during rush hours? Is it off-peak? Is it weekends?
Weekends is not as common, but it can happen off-peak on weekdays and pretty much always in rush hour. And yeah, it happens maybe 50% of the time that I take the bus. And I take the bus about usually twice a day, every day.
Mm-hmm. To get better service, do you think there are basically 3 options? Provincial monies, city monies, or raise fares?
Mm-hmm.
Which would you how would you rank them in terms of priority, where we should put our energies?
Number 1 is certainly provincial. The province canceled operations funding for the TTC about 20 years ago. And yes, we get a little bit of gas tax money and we can buy buses with that, and that's great, but they don't really help us very much to fund the 4th largest transportation system on the continent. And they certainly need to be doing a hell of a lot more than they're doing now. Secondly, yes, the city could, if the province doesn't come to the table, which at the moment they're not really willing to, the city should be funding should be giving more TTC funding to avoid this crowding and these kinds of issues. And fare hike would really be a last resort because fares have increased for 7 consecutive years. So I'm actually happy that there's no fare increase this year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I have a question. If you had to choose, there's talk of council approving a $2 transfer, or 2-hour transfer.
Yeah.
Which would probably cost the TTC between $20 and $25 million. If you had $20 or $25 million to spend, would you spend it on that, or would you spend it on additional buses and routes?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think that's an important thing especially for low-income people that need to make multiple trips on the TTC every day. The 2-hour transfer is certainly useful, but crowding is also a pressing issue. So really, I think it's difficult to choose between the two. In a budget that's, I think, over $10 billion, in my opinion, I think that there's room to find money for both.
That sounds like a political answer. Anyway, thank you for your deputation tonight.
Thank you.
Next, we have June Hall. Hi.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is June Hall. I'm a board member of the Toronto Coalition for Better Childcare, and I'm a director of Main Square Daycare in East Toronto. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. On behalf of the Toronto Coalition for Better Childcare, I surveyed 119 not-for-profit childcare centres within its total membership. We were concerned that the City of Toronto had not paid the rates to daycares, had not paid the rates the daycares had budgeted for. We conducted a survey in the winter of 2017 among our members to see if the city was paying their rates as budgeted by the daycare centres. This survey was conducted amongst the Toronto Coalition for Better Childcare membership. So I want to provide you with some of the participant details. 119 daycare centers were sent out surveys. 48 surveys were returned, which represents a 40% response rate, which is pretty good. 31 wards out of 44 were represented. This included 5,639 licensed spaces, of which 1,936 were subsidy spaces, and 2,880.50 were full fee spaces. 822.50 of those total spaces were vacant. We learned that 96% of childcare programs had their budgets cut. Our data showed on average childcare fees were underfunded by the City of Toronto for 2017 by the following amounts. Infants, $4.68 per day per child. Toddlers, $4.49 per day per child. Preschoolers, $4.57 per day per child. Kindergarten, $4.09 per day per child. School age, $3.17 per day per child. The budget year starts in January, and the city did not confirm our rates until May. When they did confirm our rates, it was far less than programs had budgeted for, and by then, it was too late to adjust expenses. Based on a 40% response rate, childcare programs lost $750,102.17. If these numbers are the same for the remaining 60% that did not respond, we're potentially looking at a figure in excess of $1 million. The most common reasons given by city staff for these cuts were: staff are overpaid. Does the city want us to pay our staff less? Program costs are too high. Program requirements are dictated by the province and the city, and we are responding as managers of daycares to those requirements. Administration costs are too high. How do we attract good people? They want us to pay less for food. How do we do that? Gift cards from Loblaws? We spend too much money on housekeeping supplies. Do they want us not to have a clean and sanitary daycare? Staff benefits are too expensive. The benefits we give our staff are less than what the City of Toronto gives similar staff, and it goes on and on. Our survey indicates, in order to meet these rate cuts by the City of Toronto, cuts will occur across all aspects of the budget for childcare programs, including staff salaries, benefits, food for the children, etc., etc. Rates will have to increase for non-subsidized families. The city has, in fact, reduced funding in the system by compromising good quality programs. We can't expand quality programs if you take money out of the system. If you underpay childcare programs, parents have to pay more. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. If you look at the preliminary staff budget, we're actually going to be investing $48 million new dollars of which we only have to put in 2. So in the real politics of this place, I think that's going to happen. However, here's the question, and this is what I'm going to ask, what I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
The staff proposal is that this new investment, thanks to the province, is a multi-year phased investment. They're recommending that in the first year, that any new monies coming from the province and our $2 million contribution go towards supporting subsidized spaces rather than bringing down the cost that you articulated now.
Right, right.
That puts us in one of those kind of lifeboat ethics kinds of like, we want to fund both. Eventually, both will get funded in the years to come. But in the first year, they're recommending focus on the subsidies rather than the cost of the overall programs. What would your input be on that very specific issue?
We talk about it all the time at the Toronto Coalition. We have to maintain our funding and grow our funding to have a healthy system. And as a manager of a childcare program who's had a number of experiences over the last 3 years, a lot of stuff has been done to cut my budget dramatically in consecutive years. And I'm a 31-year veteran, so I'm pretty savvy at my finances. And when things start to go downhill very quickly, I very quickly know what to do to rein things in. But there are a lot of managers out there that do not have those kinds of skills, and boards who do not have those kinds of skills. So what we're basically saying is, keep money in childcare, improve the funding for childcare, but I'm coming to you with data about what happened to us in 2017, and we are still recovering from that. And how do you build a strong, good quality system if you keep doing it, cutting? Because you can't make things better without investing money.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Flagadakis?
Oh, sorry. I was just wondering, what might the rate increase be, in your opinion? Like you were talking about that the subsidy, the amount isn't what it could be.
Actually, what's going on is childcare programs have 2 types of clients. They have clients who can pay the full cost of care, and then the secondary client is the City of Toronto. So our full fee clients have been paying our costs all the way along. But what has been happening with the city is they've been shorting their payments. And so we turn to the full fee clients again, asking them for more money to make up for the fact that we're not being paid properly by the city. So I don't have any data in terms of 2018 as to how programs are going to address what just happened to them in 2017. And I can tell you quite frankly right now, I haven't even submitted my 2018 budget because I don't know and haven't been provided with my direct operating funding, and that is crucial to my budget for me to be able to set my rates. So until the city provides the childcare community with that funding allotment for each of the childcare programs, we can't set rates accordingly.
So when did you in 2017, were you able to set your rates?
2017, when we did our budget in November of 2016 and submitted it to the City of Toronto, we set our rates for 2017. You did not tell us until May of 2017 that you weren't going to pay it. So we were already full on into operation. And on top of that, the provincial legislation changed, and now we have to maintain ratios from 9 o'clock in the morning which used to be later than that, which requires more staff and more funding. So
So you're even further behind?
we're even further behind.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, welcome to Councillor Janet Davis. You have a question?
Thanks for coming, June.
Oh, no problem.
So the proposed childcare budget that's before us actually has some significant investments that were provided by the federal and provincial government left out. I'm not sure if you addressed that, and I'm very sorry I came in late. I was, well, I won't tell you where. Anyway, there are hearings downtown and here today, so there's $12 million provided by the provincial / federal government that is sitting in a funded but not included category for 825 new subsidies. As well, there's money to invest in per diem rates and more directly funded base budget funding. So I guess this really is a rhetorical question. Do you think it makes sense to have received additional funding from other levels of government and yet not put it into the recommended budget or the preliminary budget that's before us?
It's important that all money that's tagged for childcare goes to childcare. Because in 2017, Janice, I did do a survey online amongst the Toronto Coalition membership, and their budgets were cut by $750,000. Sorry, I got to put my glasses back on. $102.17. I can leave my report with you. But
Okay.
basically, a lot of the childcare programs, their rates were underfunded by the city to the tune of $4 in all categories except school age in 2017.
So I'm very interested in seeing that, because when additional funding came in June from the federal and provincial governments, additional money was allocated to address actual cost, and the city's policy is it will pay actual cost for the fee subsidies. So I'd be very interested in seeing that afterwards.
Oh, absolutely.
If I could, June. One of the things that the city approved when it approved its 10-year growth strategy for childcare, it received funding from the province, it received funding from the provincial government, and we committed to spend 20% matching dollars from the city to match the provincial money. And I'm wondering, that is not in this recommended budget.
It should
and
be.
it is intended to address the issue of affordability. So I'm wondering what you would tell City Council about what it should do with its commitment to match 20% dollars with the federal and provincial dollars.
Yeah, all money that's tagged for childcare, no matter what level of government it's at, should go to childcare. It should all stay in childcare.
Okay, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
deputation today. Next, I have Adam Ashampong. Adam here? Ah, there.
Just
Hi.
a small correction, it's a dome. That's
It's
yeah, weird misprint inside the paper,
it
but
says ADA.
it does, yeah, it's ADOM.
Oh, AD, oh, so I would have got that right.
You would have, yeah. it's
Yeah, okay, all
No
right,
worries.
thank you, and welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Adoma Champong, and I am the Community Coordinator for East End Arts, which is the local arts service organization for East Toronto. I'd like to start by thanking you for inviting community feedback today for council's and also for council's past support for arts and cultural funding. We are respectfully asking that this budget reaffirm the city's longstanding $25 per capita arts funding target, and ultimately to include the final $2 million for the arts in the 2018 budget. This funding is important as it allows East End Arts and other local arts service organizations to continue supporting the City of Toronto's work in priority neighborhoods, and also by improving or by providing inclusive programming for all artists and community members, including youth and children. East End Arts is the city's youngest local arts service organization, founded in 2013, following the City Council's commitment to increase arts funding. Investments to date have already shown huge results, as seen in the recent Norda City report presented to the Economic Development Community last November. With city support, East End Arts has had great success reaching out to communities outside of the core and into neighborhood improvement areas. But I'd like to talk to you today about a specific East End Arts program that serves as a representative example of the impact of the high impact of long-term arts programming in the lives of youth in our communities. The program is called SELF, and it was developed by East End Arts with arts facilitator Zara Ajee. SELF gives youth the time to develop their skills and work collaboratively on art informed by their personal identities and lived experiences. Targeting youth from 14 to 29, SELF ran for 6 weeks at Access Point on Danforth and offered a fun and safe environment for youth to use visual arts as a means to explore their identities and tell their own personal stories. Over 6 weeks, 8 participants from a variety of backgrounds worked closely with Zara to produce their respective pieces of artwork. Some of the participants were experienced artists, and some had worked with one medium but not the other. Through a series of in-depth, hands-on exercises and discussions, participants not only learned new art skills, but shared and traded knowledge and expertise between themselves, all with the expert of a guided professional artist. One of the group pieces created was a series of self-portraits, which participants covered with labels that they and others had been placed on them throughout time, including words such as emotional, independent, whitewashed, impure, and uplifting. These pieces were incredibly impactful to both the youth and the visitors of Access Point on Danforth. One of the important features of this program was its accessibility and its openness. Not only is Access Point on Danforth fully accessible, but all workshops were completely free to participants, with lunches and TTC travel costs provided by East End Arts. One self-participant, named Isaac Wong, identifies as an autistic youth artist and has limited mobility and communication skills. Thanks to the design of the program and the creation of a space that was open, safe, and welcoming, Isaac was able to participate fully with his peers. With the assistance of a professional artist and his caregiver, Isaac was able to use visual arts as a means to not only learn more about himself as an individual, but to ultimately express himself through the arts. To quote Kathy, his caregiver, SELF was a very safe and supportive environment for young people. After spending nearly 250 hours together, all of the participants, they've expressed gratitude for the opportunity to work with fellow artists from different cultures while learning new art techniques. They've made lifelong bonds, learned new skills, and had a truly transformative experience. Many have gone on to new artistic projects, including expressing interest in showing their artwork in other areas of the city and even across the GTA, including the Eden Arts Festival, which is in Guelph, where Isaac and the collective of nonverbal communicators, Bridges Over Barriers Communication Group, were invited to show their artwork. These are the kinds of programs and projects that increased funding to the arts and culture makes possible. It allows East End Arts and other local art service organizations to serve the diverse needs of our communities across Toronto, making the arts truly accessible to all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your deputation. Any questions? No? Thank you. Thank you for coming
Thank you very
today.
much.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you for your work.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, and thanks for your support, councillors.
Cheers.
Okay, next I have Douglas J. Pritchard. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for this opportunity. I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years now, and my kids went to local schools, and 2 of them actually live here as well with their children in local schools. I have a doctorate in chemical engineering, and I worked as a professional engineer and as a manager in the fossil fuel industry, both in Toronto and in Alberta and internationally. And then I worked as a co-director of an international human rights organization. And when I stepped down from that organization, my children came to me and said, gave me a bunch of articles and said, "Dad, you got to read this. Climate change is really serious. You got to get informed. You got to get involved." So I read those articles and several others, and it is serious. It is real, and it's mostly us that are contributing to it. And it's perhaps the greatest threat facing humankind today. So I've done what I can as a private citizen. I rode my bike here today. I've insulated my house. I use a clothesline, turn down the thermostat, wear sweaters, bought an electric car. And that's as much as I can do on my own. So I was delighted when Toronto City Council took this as seriously as I and many others have been taking it. And with unanimous support for the Transform TO report last summer, I felt really encouraged. But now we're at the point of putting those words into actions. City staff estimated it would cost something over $6 million to fully fund Transform TO this year. But because of the late start to the program last year, and I think some hesitance on the part of the staff, they've reduced the actual request to something closer to $2.5 million. And despite this large reduction in the amount that staff have requested, I was shocked to find that it's not in the proposed preliminary budget. Nothing at all. So does that unanimous vote not mean anything to City Council and to the citizens here? I'm old enough to remember the Fram oil filter ads on TV in the 1970s. You might recall that's where the mechanic says, "You can pay me a little now for a new filter, or you can pay me a lot later for a new engine. Pay me a little now, or pay me a lot later." We too can pay a little now, such as the costs of Transform TO, or we can pay a lot later for the damage caused by climate change. In fact, we're already paying for that damage. You may recall that the rain bomb of 2005 that washed out Finch Avenue cost us over $500 million. And the flooding downtown in 2013 cost us $1 billion. And that same year, Calgary incurred a cost of $5 billion for its flooding. And this past summer, we've seen 3 hurricanes in the southern United States that have cost probably $300 billion. Who's paying for that? The householders? That's me, that's you. The taxpayers? That's me, that's you. And the insurance companies through our premiums? That's me, and that's you. In fact, this past summer, my cousin was flooded out of her house in Ottawa twice. And my brother, who lives in Houston, had to be evacuated during the hurricanes and the flooding that occurred in that city this past summer. We're already paying billions of dollars for the damage caused by climate change. And yet I understand there are some on this city council who say that we can't afford to pay for the work necessary to reduce the cost of climate change and the risks to all of us. We can't afford this? We can't afford Transform TO and a practical climate plan? We can't afford not to fully fund Transform TO. As the mechanic says, you can pay me a little now, or you can pay me a lot later. So I urge you, I beg Council, to fully fund Transform TO in this year's budget and the years to come. Otherwise, we'll all be paying a lot more, and it'll be sooner rather than later, in dollars and in lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your deputation. Councillor Mihevik and then Councillor Davis.
Yes, thank you. If we support Transform TO in the budget, it's going to cost us $1 a resident in this year's coming budget. Do you think, and frankly, I don't know, my tea leaves say we're going to win that vote. My question is are we being strong enough, aggressive enough? Do you think, how would you rank us if you were a teacher on our climate change strategy?
The strategy,
insofar as you know it.
The strategy is probably an A+ strategy. The implementation is the challenge. So I'll give you the grade at the end of this year's budget discussion.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Hi, Doug. Thanks for coming and for your excellent presentation. I have asked others in the community, in fact, I've asked you fairly recently, whether you'd be prepared to pay higher taxes to fund these important initiatives that have been left out of the budget.
Absolutely. I'm already paying for it. My house insurance premiums went up $300 this year to cover a minimal payment towards flooding if it happened. So we're already paying hundreds of dollars in the costs, and they're only going to increase. And so a modest increase in property taxes or other revenue sources to try and get a handle on this and get ahead of it, I'm certainly prepared to pay.
And you also speak to others in the community. You've been here for many years. Do you hear that from others?
But certainly there's the Nanos poll that just came out last fall that said that Canadians are quite prepared to pay additional funds to address the costs of climate change. They support pricing carbon emissions. They would support other initiatives to get us ahead of this.
Okay. And other revenue tools? It's something that Council is going to be, I think, revisiting in March. It's hard to know as part of the long-term financial plan. But obviously, we're going to be looking at ways we can both save money but also raise additional revenues. Are you willing to listen to and support potentially other kinds of revenues?
We've certainly considered things like vehicle registration taxes, road tolls, and other sources of revenue besides just property taxes. And I think all of these need to be in the mix still.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fragedakis.
Thanks so much, Doug, for coming out and for making your presentation. I was just wondering, based on Councillor Mahevik's calculations, do you have any sense of how much the dollar investment he mentioned would actually save us? I'm sure you've done lots of research on this subject. You mentioned you did.
It's really hard to say how many more billion-dollar floods we're going to have and how quickly these investments can address those. What we do know is that the costs are going to be horrific. And any investment that we can make today in a practical plan is going to help forestall that. But it's very hard to do it dollar for dollar. It's, again, the question of investment. You can pay me a little now or a lot later. We know what the little is now. It's still hard to quantify what the lot is. But what we've seen just this past summer, $300 billion. I just have a hard time getting my head around that number. And that's from 3 storms in 1 year, when temperatures have only risen about 1 degree Celsius on average across the planet. If it reaches 2 or 3 degrees, which people fear, we're going to see much bigger costs.
Okay. Well, that's fair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time today. Next, I have Alan Mccartney. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, people. I am Alan Mccartney of Ward 26, Don Valley West, presided by Councillor John Burnside. I extend my appreciation to the Budget Committee for the opportunity to speak today. The pivotal point in the 2017 budget was a spending cut in all city departments by 2.6%. The property tax increase was limited to the value inflation. Toronto City Council did not hesitate to vote for a salary increase. Such a decision does not inspire confidence in the Council to make commitments for improvements. Although we are managing a public institution, engineering concepts used in private corporations are also applicable to such an institution. Services and programs of municipalities are determined and specified initially, after which the cost is determined. Destructive engineering through proposed spending cuts do not attain the required objective. A proactive approach is required. As you are aware, a budget identifies both the potential revenue and disbursements for both private and public organizations. The City of Toronto is not an exception to this concept. Toronto appears to use the reverse approach by specifying cost cutting and the freezing of property taxes to the rate of inflation. Transfer payments from both the federal and provincial governments do not cover the cost of essential projects. The reluctance of Mayor John Tory to support a suitable property tax increase will not improve Toronto. The city has announced several programs that may never be adequately funded. The following design approach is necessary if Toronto City Council is serious about moving forward on its pronouncements. The first step is to identify the commitments that have been declared but not fulfilled. Upgrades to Toronto community housing, providing affordable housing by limiting official plan amendments and zoning bylaw changes, scale back redevelopment to increase childcare spaces, embrace progressive advancements and revolutionary changes to rapid transit for all Torontonians independent of residents outside the boundaries of Toronto. Expanding rail service throughout Toronto will address climate change. A 2-hour transfer pass for all transit users, not just for holders of the Presto card. Interim accommodation for homeless residents for all seasons, a stepping stone for such residents to take advantage of affordable housing. Control rampant development to prevent loss of retail service outlets and so maintain jobs. STEM redevelopment for intensification to retain recreation centers for youth, seniors, and newcomers. Make changes to accommodate people with disabilities under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. The next step is a determination of costs for each bulleted item. Toronto City Council is now obliged to fulfill these commitments. In the event that the costs exceed the value of transfer payments from the federal and provincial governments, then Toronto must utilize aggressive approaches with these governments as well as revenue tools at the city's disposal. An increase in property taxes cannot be ruled out. Spending cuts cannot be considered if the mayor desires to embrace and encourage progressive advancements and revolutionary changes. In conclusion, I recommend that the Budget Committee acknowledge and accept the commitments that are presented above, with an adherence to the associated costs that will be determined through the use of engineering concepts in a professional manner. Then and only then, Toronto will be in a position to implement these essential commitments. I also recommend that Toronto City Council divorce itself from its advancement of transit systems in Toronto and acknowledge the expertise of transit system professional personnel. The movement of citizens throughout any area within the boundaries of Toronto must be determined by transit professionals and not by way of personnel who do not have expertise in the design of such systems. I have provided a reproduction of an article that appeared in the opinion section of the Toronto Star on Sunday, January the 10th, 2016. The article that was prepared by a transit professional was disregarded by City Council several times following my forwarding of the article to the Council. I look forward to your confirmation that the Budget Committee will pursue the foregoing recommendations. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity afforded by the committee for this presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Oops, there we go. Councillor Davis?
This morning at the budget down at City Hall, there were people who were concerned about the process where the city locks in a budget, in a tax increase, and then goes out to figure out how do you fit all the things that are approved, that are identified as things that are needed for the city, then how do you go and try and squeeze it into the box? And that process needs to change so that we actually consider a budget based on the services that Council, through consultation, has decided that are needed. So you mentioned about getting locked into a tax increase based on what the mayor has asked for. And I'm wondering if you wanted to expand a bit on that, thinking how we might change the process, or whether or not we should be looking at something that really does include the various services that have been identified and programs that are not included in the budget.
I'm not so sure I understand your term by locking in something. What I'm simply saying is I'm trying to encourage a reverse thinking where a number of people sit down and say we need a number of items which I identified.
Right.
And that is what you need.
Right.
But what we are hearing year after, let's say over a number of years, I can't give you a specific number of years. Oh, we're not going to have it. Yes, we're going to have it, but now we can't have it. And when I'm saying we don't want to rule out a tax increase. So if you determine what the cost is, and then if you have to go, if you determine the cost, then you got to find out where the money is. Now, you may have to go to the federal government or the provincial government using aggressive measures, not the scripted speeches I hear when I watch CP24 by the members of parliament, members of the provincial parliament. So you sit down, you decide what you need, you come up with a cost. Now, when you design something or plan something, there is always some sort of a contingency built into that. That is not always easy to do, and that value of a contingency is very difficult. So you should be able to come up with a cost. Let's say, I don't know, let's say affordable housing. Let's use that as an example. And what we're seeing nowadays is, my comment was based on a developer goes to the city, makes his request, is not happy with the decision, and finds some way to get his own way, so that land is lost. What you got to find some way to do, and I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying you can do it overnight. You got to find some way to stop changing the rules to satisfy people where you're losing land. So if you retained or be able to keep whole of that city land, then you could be in the driver's seat to decide, I can put affordable housing there. Right now, we're hearing all kinds of discussions, but in the meantime, the building industry is behind us, basically having our land, shall we say, donated to them through one way or another. The OMB, for example. Does that answer your question?
It's an answer that was very interesting, and I enjoyed it.
I'm thinking.
What I was trying to understand, and it's okay, the way our budget works is that in the spring, we set something and say, that's what we want to achieve, that tax rate increase, and then, oh, by the way, figure out how it's going to get into the budget. And it's a bit hard. It makes this process difficult. So we have a page of things that we approved, the list, the bullet points of all the things, the anti-poverty strategy, the climate and environmental strategy, the childcare strategy, recreation improvements, but they're not in the budget. So now we're trying to figure out how we put them in. And I guess I'm just asking whether or not we should be doing it a different way.
I'm sort of.
Setting the tax
sorry.
rate and setting the tax rate after we've decided what should be in the budget.
Yeah,
I guess that was my question.
Yeah,
Should we be doing it differently?
I'm using the concept of engineering something.
Okay.
This may seem like a rather crude comparison, but the corporation of the City of Toronto is to design something into the city is very similar, let's say, to designing a computer system. You need something, and then you find out what it's going to cost. If you don't want to put it in the budget because you think it's going to cost too much, then you'll never get it.
Okay. Thank you for coming today.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Murray Lumley.
Good afternoon. Dear Budget Subcommittee members, City Councilors, and members of the audience. My name was mentioned, Murray Lumley. My wife and I live in Ward 31, Beaches, East York, and I'm a member of Danforth Mennonite Church, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I've spoken before in this venue about the need to tax wealth, and I still believe in that need in order to decrease the growing harmful inequality we see in our city, country, and world. Mitigating inequality is a topic of hot discussion right now with the recent provincial raise of the minimum wage to $14 an hour and in one more year to $15 an hour. Also, the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives just reported that the latest average remuneration of the top 100 Canadian CEOs is now at a new high of 209 times that of the average worker's income in their companies. CEOs make as much by 11 a.m. January 2nd as the average worker makes all year. And trillions of dollars, we know, are stashed in offshore banks by people in many countries, so the rich can avoid the taxes that should pay for services that make life better for everyone, including themselves. History teaches that this kind of deliberately created inequality cannot stand for long. But I am happy that Toronto City Council has in recent years approved plans to increase access to affordable housing, recreation, and childcare, build strong neighborhoods, and promote social inclusion for newcomers, seniors, youth, and children. Initiatives were passed to respond to the challenges of climate change, as we heard, confront anti-Black racism, forge respectful partnerships with Indigenous communities, make public transit more affordable for low-income residents, and reduce poverty. These are all wonderful objectives. The problem is that all of these services are, as we've been talking about, are underfunded. I understand to the tune of about $95 million, even though the 2018 budget has been called a balanced budget with property tax increases at the inflation rate. And I would add, user fees, along with this, are at an all-time high. And this is the worst way to get maximum participation by people who can't afford the user fees. Total, one of the things in the budget when it was released in December, and I was there and heard this and see it in the documents, there's two numbers, and I've just subtracted them. Total, this year, total per capita spending has declined by $218 per person between 2010 and 2018. The city manager made a point, or whoever was presenting made a point of showing that, which means that Toronto is not even standing still, it is going backwards. How does one solve this problem? My suggestion is to do budgeting differently, and I'm hearing that already from people here and I guess this morning. In a book called Compassion and Solidarity, The Church for Others, that I read just a little while ago, written by theologian Gregory Baum, who once taught at St. Michael's College and died last year, Mr. Baum discussed liberation theology and the base communities of Latin America of the last century, where the oppressed poor studied the Bible as a manual of God's good news for the poor in this life, not in some future heaven. Baum calls this the preferential option for the poor. What this means is that we try to see the world through the eyes of the poor in our society. Baum posed another problem, that because we are stuck inside a particular political and economic system, the one we're in, we see it as the only way of doing things. What if we used our imaginations and practiced the preferential option for the poor in creating the budgets of our city? We've just seen how powerful the homelessness issue has become with a reversal of a council decision not to open an armory and then turned it around because of public pressure and what was happening to the people on the streets in the recent cold weather. What if, at the beginning of budget formation, a decision was made to end homelessness once and for all, to build affordable housing with social worker supports? Of course, support would be elicited from upper levels of government. Maybe one result would be that the multi-billion-dollar Gardner Expressway East project would be left unfunded and might require crowdfunding by the 5,000 drivers who benefit. Perhaps the planned one-stop Scarborough subway would have to be abandoned as unaffordable. Would this be so bad if we had a majority of happy, healthy people living in Toronto? In the Toronto Star, I read recently a member of the Toronto Youth Cabinet in an interview about the budget, this 2018 budget with Mayor Tory, said she'd like to see the whole process changed. Why are we only asking for public consultation at the end, she asked. Instead of first setting a priority like keeping taxes low, why not look at the city you want to build and then decide how to fund it? I agree. Why not build the city we want, compassionate, healthy, and safe, and agree to pay for all of it? Thank you.
It's very good timing. Any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Oh.
I do want to thank Murray, and I'll just ask the question again that I asked before, maybe in a clearer way. Do you think we should be first looking at and deciding on what we need, and then including it in the budget, and then discussing the tax rate?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably limits at both ends. Mm-hmm. We probably can't pay for everything that we would like to have. We'd like to have transit perfect now, so there's no crowding anymore at
Right.
at Bloor and Young. But in general, as these young people are saying in the Toronto Youth Cabinet, let's look at what kind of city we want. There's all kinds of media, right? They're writing this all the time. Matt Elliott writes it all the time, and others write about it all the time. Why don't we take a look at what we really need to make a great city, and then see what we can, what all those things that we can afford to do. But my aim here is that we need to look at the bottom economic level and do something about that. I think that's a really severe problem in this city.
Mm-hmm.
I live downtown, East York. I live right on Danforth. And I just had some conversations with a couple of the young people that are operating the Riverdale, it's RHAG, Riverdale Housing Action Group, that looks after women, single women and children. I was looking at their literature yesterday, 100% of whom live below the poverty line. And our church was giving some materials over Christmas to that group. We found that group on your webpage, the list of organizations in Toronto and their list of things that they needed. We used that. And I found this organization that is helping women and children in particular, all of whom live below the poverty line. They're housing them, and they're going to build more housing. I think that's where we should start.
But you would agree the provincial and federal government has a role?
Yes,
Has
I do.
access to the income tax?
Yes.
And the most revenue there is in this country.
Yes,
Yeah, okay, thank you.
thank you. Yes.
Councillor Mihevik?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for quoting Gorgie Baum, who was actually my teacher, my mentor, my thesis director, and partially
I
responsible.
loved his book, 1987, and it was the Massey
Yes.
Lecture.
That's right, that's right. And yes, he was part of the reason why I am the weird person that I am. But if we were to take his writings seriously, frankly, and really kind of apply it to this particular budget, it would seem to me that we would take as a priority all the poverty reduction measures, which are at least $12 million, not debate or prioritize them, but just frankly fund them all. Take the budget from below,
Yep.
fund that, and then if there's anything extra, we can look at other pieces. But certainly poverty reduction would be the centerpiece of what I think he would advocate. I'm just wondering if
agree.
you have any additions to that.
No, I just agree with you.
Okay.
And I hope more do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I like it when you agree with me. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Next speaker I have is Tom McLaughlin. Okay, not seeing him, we'll return to that name. Then I have Prince Sabanda, Flemington Community Legal Services.
Thank you, councillors. This will be sort of a joint presentation because it's addressing the same issue. My name is Prince Sibanda. I'm a board member of Flemington Community Legal Services. I'm also a community service member for the same board. And my colleague is, can you introduce yourself?
Mayada Subrati,
It is Sobrati. Okay, great, thank you.
also member of
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to appear before the committee. We have also submitted a letter to go with our budget ask. The Flemington Community Legal Services is mandated to serve the welfare of low-income residents. And as part of that mandate, what Flemington Community Legal Services has been doing is to seek progressive resolution to the exclusion of historically marginalized populations from employment, especially the trades and social procurement opportunities and such. And the city, through the poverty reduction strategy and other measures, has been a champion in this cause. So we'd like to applaud you for that. But in April 2015, the city actually made recommendations for the implementation of a community benefits protocol. Our worry right now is that the Community Benefits Protocol, that initiative, that council directive has not any resources allocated to it. So what we'll be asking is that we allocate financial and human resources so that the work on community benefits at the city gets off the ground. I've been working on community benefits over the last 5 years myself. I consider myself a specialist at this. I've worked in Toronto with various networks, academics, especially on the Eglinton Crosstown. I've worked with colleagues from Europe, and we've looked at some projects and worked with colleagues in the US, including the Coalition on Working Families. There's a number of projects, including the redevelopment of the Army Navy base in Auckland, the transit projects in California. Almost all political and civic leaders agree that community benefits are a proven tool within which to tackle poverty and increase the participation rate of historically marginalized populations such as women, children, newcomers, international trained professionals in the employment sector. They've been recognized as smart public policy and smart economics, maximizing return on investment by looking at social, economic, and environmental returns for every dollar invested. So I'm urging that the city picks up on its resolution, on its commitment in 2015 to allocate resources to this cause. The report that came back from the poverty reduction staff report towards the end of last year had very little to say on community benefits, except to say that we should pilot some projects and report back on the possibilities in the third quarter of 2019. This is a commitment that was made in 2015, and we're urging the city through this budget process to allocate the resources. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to address the community. I am speaking as a resident of Ward 26. And I'm also representing the Flemington Community Legal, which I am also a member of that. I am an international trained engineer who has a lived experience of difficulty of integrating into the Canadian job market. I concur with my colleague friends that initiatives such as the Community Benefit Agreement are a proven way of getting historical communities such as newcomer and immigrant and women to be employed and participate in the economy of Canada. We are asking the budget committee to allocate the financial and human resources to support the commitment made in 2015 to align a focus on procurement policy and create a community benefit agreement protocol to achieve social, economic, and environmental benefits to the local communities impacted by proposed development and infrastructure projects, and to support the employment objective of Toronto workforce, develop strategy including that of the Youth Employment Action Plan, Youth Equity Strategy, and Newcomer Strategy, and to report back to progress on executive community in the fourth quarter of 2015. Thank you again, and we will take a question if any there.
Any question? Councillor Mihevik.
Yes, thank you very much. I think you are really onto something, to be quite honest. We are at step number 1 in Toronto, Canada, on community benefits agreements. The Americans and the British are like at step 5, 6. They have all kinds of programs and ways and policies that help the communities of interest that you mentioned go through. Right now, I don't notice, it is not in even the list of possible enhancements to the poverty reduction plan. It's not listed on that $41 million list. It is something that I've asked for a report on, but it's not there. Why is it so important from a poverty reduction point of view to you to have that piece further developed?
Thank you, Councillor. The reason why it's important to have that piece further developed is because I do not believe that you can tackle poverty without addressing systemic barriers that directly impact the communities, that hinder these communities that are in dire poverty from progressing. If we look at sort of the priority neighborhood areas, the 13 priority neighborhood improvement areas, we've got higher rates of unemployment for youth than any other parts of the city. I was working on the Eglinton Crosstown project with Toronto Community Benefits Network, and there is 5 communities along that that path, that tunnel, that are impacted by that project, that are directly benefiting as a result of this right now. So also, if you look at the development happening now around the city, it's affecting those same residents that are, through gentrification and other means, are forced to therefore leave those communities, and because they can't afford the rent, they have to move out, so further marginalizing them and moving them north and east of the city. So what I'm arguing is that if the communities that are affected by development that's actually occurring in their backyard are not benefiting from this, we're disenfranchising a whole section of the community. Case in point is the Don Mills Crossing. Don Mills Crossing is such a perfect example of why we need a community benefits agreement at the city. That whole area at Don Mills and Eglinton is being redeveloped, and the developers are pretty much shifting the zoning, or asking to move the zoning from employment lands to dense residential. If we had community benefits embedded within city procurement and development process and planning processes, we will be able to extract some benefits from the community, so that either the residents are employed in that same development, or which is what Section 37 doesn't typically address right now. We don't have the tools to ensure the people that are historically marginalized or excluded from the economy have a footstep in, and that they have a say in the planning process. Through the poverty reduction strategy, we've done some community consultations, great work. But the community has not been empowered itself to identify its own needs and how they can help themselves. So community benefits actually has an organizing component and an empowerment component to it that will allow those same people to inform the city on how best to utilize some of the resources.
And is it not true, and I'm recalling the initial consultations we had when we got the poverty reduction strategy going, and you'd ask the community, what is the thing that you really want in terms of poverty reduction? What's the thing that the city should be doing? You know what their first answer was? A good job.
Jobs.
A good job. And that is something that is supported by the left, the right, by everyone. And is it not the case, from you seem to have some knowledge on this, the community benefits actually, they're not really, it's a way of doing business more than it is a program that costs the city
Exactly. It doesn't
money.
cost the city extra dollars. It's a way of doing business, yes, but it's also a way of making sure that development does pay for its own impact on these communities.
Yes. Great, thank you. Thanks for your...
Councillor Davis has a question.
Thank you very much for coming. I believe you did come and make a deputation when that last report came to committee. Is that...
I was with my colleagues. I did not make that deputation, but yes.
You were with the Community Benefits Network?
Yes, I was
yes,
with the Community
yes.
Benefits Network.
So my understanding is that the reason for their not lack of, but the time it is taking them to develop this model of not just the community benefits for the Metrolinx projects, but for all other city projects, is that they believe they have not yet captured the methodology to do it, and they have more work to do on it. So I was there at the time asking those questions, and they're developing it. So you're saying they don't have enough staff or the resources to be able to move this thing forward effectively? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay.
I think we've developed great expertise over the past few years and over the past few months since the last deputation was made. The Made in Canada Community Benefits has an interesting component to it that doesn't even exist anywhere in the world. This is the professional administration and technical jobs. This was to ensure that women are included in these jobs. So it wasn't just the trades, the apprenticeship jobs. So it's got another stream to it. But yes, we do. What we're asking for really is that the city itself, as a major employer, has a community benefits policy attached to its development projects, which doesn't exist right now. So there is the community organizing bid, and Toronto Community Benefits and other players can worry about how they resource that. And there's foundations that have put money into it. It will be great if the the developers themselves actually funded these initiatives, as is the case in the U.S. Common benefits are predominantly funded by the developers in the U.S., but it's sort of a different, it's sort of different dynamics in how infrastructure projects are done in the Canadian context. So I won't go into that debate. What we're asking for the city to do is that the city actually allocates human and financial within the city, so that the city itself, as a major employer, has a community benefits protocol. And they can tap into the knowledge that exists within TCBN and other players in this field. But we're asking the city itself to follow up on a commitment it made in 2015, April 22, 2015, to actually set up a common benefits protocol or common benefits mechanism in place at the city.
Right. So my question was, it seemed to me that it was going to take some time, and maybe they needed additional resources to be able to do that work. No?
Those are the resources that have not been allocated.
It was a joint report that talked about social procurement plus community benefits, and the social procurement piece is sort of well underway.
Yes.
It's the other piece, which is the community benefits piece, that needs further development so that they are matching the right people with the right kinds of jobs, is my understanding. And so they are working on using a pilot project approach to doing that, and that pilot project is being developed. But I'm wondering whether you know what resources are required that might be included in the budget that would support that work. Maybe I just need to ask staff.
We're getting a briefing note on it.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
That's good. Okay, thank you very much for coming down today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be happy to discuss it.
But
Next speaker I have is...
it's off the edge of somebody's
Councillors.
desk.
Next speaker I have is Diane Dyson. Good afternoon.
I'm here to speak today not only as a policy wonk, as somebody who's worked on the neighborhood improvement areas, the poverty reduction strategy, the vacant property tax rebate, and this annual pleading where we often always show up. But I'm also here today as a client of the city. So let me be a bit personal for a few minutes. My daughter had asked me recently if we were poor when she was young, because she remembered that her dad had gone to a food bank. Well, we're not there now. Even as a lone parent, my salary it keeps pace with the city's average household income. But when she was young, our family income fell well below the statistical poverty cutoffs, something I was very familiar with because I did a lot of number crunching then. I remember one year we earned $12,000 as a family. We qualified, though, thankfully, thank you, for a childcare subsidy. And so she had excellent care where she went, and it let me go to school and study and take some part-time, non-unionized jobs that gave us our meager family income. We were modest in our spending. A trip to Charity Village or Goodwill was a big time out. There were no overnight summer camps. Vacations were at my parents' home, luckily outside the city. And I even remember my own parents struggled to get out of poverty. In my world, poverty was just one of those things that we cycled through. Life is not a fairy tale, my grandmother had told me when I asked her about her struggles. Both my grandmothers were sole income earners as well, raising young families in the post-war period. But I was lucky. I'd never had to go, in fact, actively resisted going on social assistance because I knew of the further impoverishment I would need to demonstrate to do that. Instead, I learned my grandmother's tricks, she who ran a boarding house. We let out our front bedroom, and 3 of us, my 2 children and I, crammed into bunk beds in the small back bedroom. I got good at scavenging and learning to find money, working under the table. And a gap at month's end sent me to friends for dinner, where they were often also generous with bags of hand-me-downs. But what also saved us was not just that I had the energy to push us through, was that we lived in pre-amalgamated city of Toronto, where there were public supports, such as childcare subsidies and a good transit system, pools where my kids could learn to swim and even fish. We took that streetcar ride over to Bathurst to try that out. They learned to skate. there were snack programs at the school. And this very snack program, and then I see Heather, thank you, I still thank you, Heather, for feeding my kids. So she was the snack lady back then. She also cut carrots and served yogurt to Jeffrey Baldwin's sister. Jeffrey Baldwin was the young 5-year-old in our neighborhood who died of neglect from his grandparents' care. But his sister, his sibling, went to my kid's school, and the pediatrician in the trial afterwards said that that was the difference that kept her from starving. That was the difference. So I haven't forgotten those lessons from the early days with my daughter and her brother, how public libraries were a favorite family outing because they were close by and, most important, free. I knew which hours the museums offered free entry. In fact, I think, and I was glad to remember the mayor of Calgary, Naheed Nenshi, talking about growing up in a low-income family himself. He explained, though, that he wasn't poor because there was a pool down the street and parks around the corner and a good bus ride downtown and the municipal services that also kept him and his family going. So my kids are now both graduated from post-secondary schools, but if the circle turns and they too fall into poverty, if life happens to them, then I want to know that the supports that they will need will be there so that they have a chance to climb back out as well. We saw a path ahead of us and we were able to take it. Every day, social agencies like Wood Green and others in this neighborhood work to create those pathways so that people can find their way out. And so I plead with you, don't block them. Listen to the voices in front of you. Listen to the voices that appear here every year. Be brave. Understand that there will be complaints and grumbles if you charge us a couple of extra dollars every few weeks, but resist that. We need to create a city where everyone belongs. If you have had the courage to endorse 22 strategies for youth and for seniors, for people with disabilities, for anti-Black racism, for safe neighborhoods, for climate change, then fund them.
Okay, thank you for your time today. Questions?
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Next speaker we have is Charlotte Garcia.
Good afternoon. My name is Charlotte Garcia, and I was the breakfast program coordinator at General Crerar School in Ward 37. This program was a before-school breakfast program for any child who arrived early at the school. We would typically have between 50 and 65 children at this program, many of whom had been on a bus for 30 to 45 minutes and who were needing a top-up before school began. As this is a community with high economic need, several students were also walking to the program. Any child who arrived at the program was served a breakfast meal without regard for any religious restrictions, financial need, or for any other reason. We had several options available for the children to be able to choose from, such as toast with or without jam, cheese, a selection of cereals with milk, and a choice of fruit. And as such, we were able to serve any child without restriction. This program received funding through the Salvation Army Public Relations Department and the Ontario Realtors Care Foundation. Other funding came from the Scarborough Citadel Community and Family Services and through a grant from the Toronto Student Nutrition Program. We have had occasional parent volunteers and community college social work students help us, but for the most part, the program has been fairly simple to run and does not require a lot of manpower. The breakfast program began 6.5 years ago, 2 days a week, fully sponsored by the Salvation Army, and was then supported by a grant from Student Nutrition to be able to run 5 days a week. This program has been important for General Crerar. General Crerar has a large special needs component as well as French immersion. Many kids are bused into the school and many of them have been on a bus for a very long time. The school is also one of the needier schools within the TDSB and is labeled a model school for inner cities. Teachers have been very, very supportive of this program. I have been surprised at the number of teachers who have spoken to me about the benefits of having the breakfast program available for the children who need it. There has been talk of improved behavior and better learning outcomes. Here are some of the quotes I was given from some of the teachers. Quote, as a teacher who always comes in early, I was able to get to know the students who ate at the breakfast program. I know that they started their day very early and we were providing an important service for their families. For teachers and other caring adults to connect with students, we need those moments outside of class to connect and foster a positive relationship. Charlotte was a caring adult in their lives, and she got to know them really well, supporting them with a warm and friendly smile. How are you? How was your weekend, etc. This chit-chat in the morning is meaningful and shows students that we care about them. Another teacher, I understand that in the larger picture, one school breakfast program may seem insignificant to many, but I can honestly tell you the level of caring and compassion this program has brought to our school is invaluable. Another one, I run an empathy building program called Pause for Pause at our school, and when I would walk in carrying one of our rescued pets in his or her carrier each day, Miss Charlotte would graciously greet not only me, but my creature too. Miss Charlotte would often share stories of her family's own pets over the years, and I noticed that the students connected with this very much. The students would add to the conversation about the animals with Miss Charlotte and I, and it was overall such a great way to start the day. Very positive. And finally, like Tom McEwen, our principal, said yesterday, which was the first day that the breakfast program was not running, these students are hungry when they get off the bus. Most have been on the bus for at least 30 to 45 minutes. They need breakfast when they get to school. Without breakfast, students are not able to concentrate and be ready to learn. Many of our families are disadvantaged, and we need this program to help feed our students. So we would like to thank the city for all financial input into programs such as this very needed breakfast program at General Cruier. We cannot run this program without your financial contribution. Without a good breakfast available to the students, children who are coming from afar for specialized programs, and children who live near, who may be new to the neighborhood or country, will be at an educational disadvantage due to having an empty stomach until the morning meal program is provided for them later in the morning. We need to ensure that children are not at a disadvantage first thing in the morning. Thank you. Yes.
Councillor Mihevik.
Yes, so the city's at paying for 18% of the program. That's how much we pay for, 18%. And if this allotment goes in this year, it's going to be 20% of the program.
Okay.
If the province and the province puts in about half of that, so they put in around 8, 9, 10 in. If the province put in 20% and the feds put in, it'd be a substantial increase in that budget. What would it mean to your school if that happened?
Well, I think based on the comments that I received from the teachers and the principal, it would mean that kids who are hungry when they get there wouldn't be hungry for their first class. And that's, I think, the important thing, because they do get something a little bit later. But
do you have enough resources now to feed all the kids every day, Monday to Friday, from September after Labor Day to the end of June?
I am not responsible for that part of it, so I don't know the answer to that. I know they do have another program now at the school, but the breakfast program had to be terminated.
Had to be terminated.
It had to be terminated.
So additional monies would help facilitate those kinds of...
Yes, if we could run it again, we would. But right now, we can't. It's finished, so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks for coming today.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Heather Martinez. There's Heather. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, I have to find my notes on
That's
my
okay.
thing.
I'll just wait till you're ready and then I'll start the timer.
Hi, my name's Heather Martinez. I'm a nutrition coordinator at Faywood ABC School. I am also an educational assistant with deaf and special needs children, allowing me to see firsthand the effect of a full or empty belly in our students' ability to learn and actively participate in class. No parent wants to send their kid to school without breakfast, but it happens every day. I often hear, "Oh, our school doesn't need that. That's only needed in at-risk schools." This is an unfortunate misconception. It is not the families living in poverty, the single parents. It is all of us. Yes, you, me. Mornings are a chaotic rush to get out of the door. Breakfast is forgotten, half-eaten, children are too rushed or sleepy. And yes, many homes, there just isn't enough food. Many schools have changed their schedules to focus on literacy and math in the morning, the ultimate learning time of day. This doesn't work when students are hungry. When our school first introduced the nutrition program, teachers complained, "That will interfere with my teaching time." In less than a month, those same teachers came to me and said, "You know that kid in my class that can never sit still, disrupted my class all the time? He sits through the whole morning with food."
Yes, food can make that much of a difference. I love it when kids beg me to serve zucchini and beets, food that they'd never eaten before, because they're learning how healthy food makes them feel. Parents look at me in disbelief. He refuses to eat vegetables at home. I explain, it's peer pressure at its best. If everyone else is eating it, so will they. Our recently immigrated students have fun tasting new foods, and their eyes light up when they see something familiar. A couple years ago, a student said to me, "Heather, you saved my life." Grade 8. I thought she was being overly dramatic, and I started to laugh. She said, "No, seriously, without the food I got every morning, I would not have made it through this past year." This was a kid from a good home, both parents professionals, living in a good area. Not a kid we would label as at risk. We seriously do not realize how many kids are arriving at school hungry, tired, unable to concentrate, lethargic, restless, acting out. This is why I'm here today. The nutrition program is vital in all of our schools. Our children are our greatest assets. We need to ensure that they are given as much opportunity to learn and thrive as possible. This can only happen when they have food fueling their brains. Thank you for your support of the nutrition programs in our schools, and please continue your support through funding. It is an investment in our future.
Hi, John. You go.
I just wondered, are you familiar with the budget for your program?
Some of it, yes.
Okay. How much has food gone up? Do you know? Have you struggled? I mean, I just noticed how much food has gone up.
It is.
In my own household.
I grew up as a missionary kid, so I know how to make ends stretch.
Right.
So,
but there's, I think primarily, the funding is to strengthen the current program and to pay for the increased costs of food.
Exactly.
And then there is some expansion, both of which are not included in the budget.
Correct.
Right, okay. And of your program, there's a lot of volunteer, you're smiling, support for these programs. And parents paying as well, correct?
Our program runs a little bit different than some of the other schools. I'm the only adult, and the kids in the school are the rest of the volunteers.
Wow.
And we've got them in leadership functions, and I've lost some of my really good ones this year because they've gone on to leadership on student council this year from the skills that they learned last year. So, yes, a lot of schools run it completely with adult volunteers, but ours is different.
And parents pay.
Parents do pay, yes. Parents that can afford pay, and the ones that can't do not. So we have probably about 50-50 that pay and those that don't at our school.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Heather, what's the name of your school?
Faywood ABC.
And that's in the TDSB?
Yes, correct.
Right. And on the Learning Opportunity Index, you're familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
Where would that school be on the Learning Opportunity Index?
I'm not sure right now.
You said it's sort of, is this sort of a middle-income area?
It's a changing area. It's
sure.
changed. I've been at that
It's a
school
little
for
bit
4
above?
years, and it has totally evolved into a totally different school in 4 years.
I found the story interesting. I mean, I think it's great. Kids get exposure to foods they wouldn't otherwise eat. They wind up eating foods they won't eat at home. But I find it disturbing that you mentioned the story about a family, 2 incomes, well-off family, sending their kids to school without any food. And it's great that we provide support for that child so that they can, get through the day. But that's only breakfast. What happens at lunchtime? Right?
Sometimes I top it up with stuff, but no, it's not right.
Like, does the principal, or the teacher say, it might be an idea to give your child some breakfast in the morning before sending them off to school? These are elementary age school children?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
You're biting your tongue.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. You don't have to. This is a public deputation. You can speak your mind, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we do that and say, like you need to send more food, but it's a delicate situation that some principals don't like to address.
Okay, great, thank you. And Councillor Fragedakis has a question.
I wanted to know
Okay.
what school you were at, but
Faywood ABC, yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you for your work and thanks for your deputation. Next, I have Heather Cornish.
Our schools are located in Ward 15. We run a breakfast club, which serves approximately 60 students per day, and a morning snack program that serves 650 students every day. We serve a wide variety of healthy foods, such as milk, yogurt, cheese, carrots, tomatoes, snow peas, bananas, apples, oranges, and grapes. These are just a few of the items we serve, not to mention a rodent favorite, garlic toast. Our funding comes from provincial and municipal grants, and parents are asked for a contribution a few times per year. We also fundraise by having a monthly pizza lunch. Our program is offered to all students, regardless of their ability to pay. Here are just a few things that parents and children say about our breakfast club. Madison says her favorite thing for breakfast is Susanna's soup. And Naro says, I like breakfast club because when I don't eat in the morning, I come to breakfast club. And Clyde says he likes breakfast club because he does not eat at home. And this is from Arlene, one of the parents. She says breakfast club and the nutrition program is an essential start to our day, and my children like it because there's a wide variety of food. The Red Door Family Shelter is our neighbor, and a lot of the children from there attend our school and greatly benefit from our breakfast and snack program. We need these programs because when you have nutritious food to start your day, you feel better and you learn better. It takes so many people to make these programs work, from the Toronto Foundation for Student Success to our great office staff who wholeheartedly support our program. Susanna and myself are just a small part of this. So I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the students and the parents to the City of Toronto for all your support, because without it, our programs would not survive.
That's great, thank you for your time. Any questions from councillors? No? Okay. Oh, Councillor Fragedakis. Yep.
Just a quick question. So you would say that you think that these student nutrition programs improve the learning environment for all the students?
Yes, and we even have classes that participate in drawing pictures, researching food items, and putting posters on the wall. So, and we do have student volunteers who help, so they're learning also.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you for coming today.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks for doing this for so many years.
Thank you.
Next speaker I have is Kate Mulligan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm Kate Mulligan. I'm the Director of Policy and Communications for the Association of Ontario Health Centres. We're the voice of community-governed primary health care here in Ontario. Our vision is the best possible health and well-being for everyone. Our 107 member centres across the province include 18 community health centres here in Toronto and 1 Aboriginal Health Access Centre here in Toronto. Our member centres focus on serving people who are most vulnerable to poor health, in large part because they face barriers to accessing healthcare services and supportive services. This includes people living on low incomes, new immigrants and refugees, francophones, the LGBT communities, Indigenous peoples, the differently abled, and people without health insurance. Under one roof, our members provide culturally competent primary health care, along with a wide range of other health promotion and community development services that help address the determinants of health. We see the impact firsthand when vulnerable people cannot access the municipal services they need to be healthy and well. To create the strong and vibrant city we all want, Toronto's government must develop, fund, and deliver programs and services that foster and sustain urban resiliency under 21st century pressures. Social programs such as affordable housing, childcare, public health, and recreation programs cannot be resilient if they're not accessible to everyone. We have reviewed the 2018 preliminary budget for Toronto and make the following recommendations for programs and services that should be included in the final budget. And this is with the support of our colleagues and their analysis from Social Planning Toronto. Number one, we'd like to see you invest in expanding services to reduce wait lists for recreation programs, especially for kids, and for affordable housing. To expand funding to address homelessness in Toronto, including providing more shelter beds. To reduce the wait list for subsidized childcare spaces and continue to invest to address the opioid crisis with support for our harm reduction programs. Number 2, support for poverty reduction initiatives, including 825 new childcare spaces and additional childcare-related initiatives and supports. Phase 1 of the recommendations of Toronto Community Housing's Tenants First implementation project. Transit fare equity measures to discount TTC passes for people on social assistance who do not receive transportation supports. Expansion of the Community Medicine at Home program to support community paramedics. Number 3, expanded services for the Toronto Urban Health Fund with $150,000 to strengthen local community response in youth and Indigenous sectors to address HIV incidence rates and substance use rates. Include funding to specifically address these issues within the Black community, as HIV rates among Black youth and women represent a high proportion of Toronto cases. Number 4, as you've heard this afternoon, support a 6th year of the student nutrition program with an additional $2.124 million to strengthen and extend the existing student nutrition programs to more students and schools. And finally, number 5, expand the student immunization program so that Toronto Public Health can meet the enhanced provincial minimum requirements for pupil immunization. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your deputation. Any questions from councillors? I have a question. The association, it's the Association of Community Health Centres.
We're called the Association of Ontario Health
Ontario.
Centres. We represent a few other models besides community health centres, but yes, we do represent the community health centres.
And where do you receive your funding? Is it right from the Ministry, from the LINS, or from the Ministry
The community, all the different models are funded differently, but the community health centres receive, our association is member funded.
Member funded from the community health centres,
Yeah,
okay. And they are funded from the LINS?
The community health centres are funded by the LINS, the Aboriginal Health Access Centres, and a few other models that we represent are funded directly by the Ministry of Health.
I see. Okay, very good. Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for coming
you.
today. Oh, sorry, Councillor Mihevik has a question.
Yes, one of the debates in the shelter housing crisis is the need for the province and the LINSs to step up and make sure that every one of our 52 agency-run and 10 city-run shelters have at least a nurse, perhaps a nurse and a podiatrist, perhaps a nurse, a podiatrist, and a mental health worker.
Yeah.
Has the association taken any position on that as a critical emerging health issue?
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing that we would be very interested in supporting. We know that that kind of team-based care is essential for meeting the needs of people facing the most vulnerabilities to health. So that's the type of model we definitely support, yes.
You're aware that right now, actually at Seton House, for example, we pay out of city dollars for a nurse that is there and for
Yes.
other medical health professionals.
Yes.
That model has to be fixed.
Yes, and we'll be making our recommendations for the provincial budget very shortly as well.
Great, okay, I'm hoping that you can put in there.
Thanks.
And my last question is, you've gotten a lot of, you've listed a lot of things. Should we be prioritizing them, or should we be making an absolute joint at the hips, you gotta fund it all? Mr. City Councillor, Ms. City Councillor, Mr. Mayor.
Look, these are all the kinds of things that we know are necessary to support the health and well-being of people facing barriers to health. I think that, we know that income inequality in particular is key. So we're primarily interested, I think, in addressing some of those inequality gaps and gaps in accessing services. So we would prioritize those. And then also we're heavily invested right now in harm reduction. So that's another area where we'd like to see, budget support and political will and support as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Sure, Councillor Davis.
So the last, when we've got our hub here at Victoria Park access point on Danforth, there were several hubs created with community health centres as the lead and sort of the anchor for providing a range of services in one location, but that was many years ago. Are there other hubs that you think we should be looking for as anchors using the community health centers as the base?
Do you mean like other neighborhoods that could use a
Yes,
community? Yes, yes. I mean, I think expanding, the community health centers are a great anchor for providing a range of services under one roof.
Right.
Not just comprehensive primary health care, but community development and services that even the city provides. So yes, we do see this as critical and important. We're working with the Ministry of Health now on expanding in some parts of the province that don't have any team-based care, but certainly there are neighborhoods here in Toronto that still require this kind of model. And we also have a number of outstanding capital applications that were approved close to 10 years ago and that have never come to fruition.
Oh, really?
So it can be a challenge for us to expand this model of care that we know is so successful. And the Auditor General just audited the CHC sector and said a lot of great things about how it works. And that's the kind of thing we would love to see expand and serve more people.
So the City of Toronto has often led the priority neighborhoods discussions, and the original Strong Neighborhoods model was supposed to have the provincial government, the federal government, the private sector, and the city at the table to discuss coordinated approaches to investment in high priority neighborhoods. That model has sort of, over time, kind of not necessarily worked in the way it was envisioned. Were the community health centers still at the table with sort of centrally in any way, working with social development and others for planning that overall strong neighborhood strategy with the United Way and others?
We certainly collaborate with other institutions like the United Way, and we're involved in a couple of expansion projects, for example, in Flemington area.
Yes.
I'm not sure about the extent to which our local member centers are engaged. Because we represent people across the province, that would be within the purview of the Toronto-based centers. They work a lot with the Toronto Central LHIN, and I'm sure would welcome the opportunity to be involved with any departments within the city that are interested in working together and bringing these services together into the communities that really need them.
So one last question. A couple of years ago, there was a great push for hubs, and the provincial government promised hubs, and we had great consultation on hubs, and as I recall, the Premier put aside or the provincial government put aside some money for hubs, and then we haven't really heard anything more about it. So are you pressing the provincial government around hubs?
We are.
Okay.
Yes, we are, and we have also yet to see a lot of development on that front. It would be a missed opportunity if we didn't see further development, but I don't see any significant investment or change, before the next election.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for coming today. Just one sec. Next name I have is Sultana Jahangir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you today?
I'm okay. Thanks for inviting us. And I hear all of this deputation is every, presentation is really giving us a lot of, information and constructive idea. So I'm speaking on behalf of South Asian Women's Rights Organization and also on behalf of their members. We are located in Oak Ridge and Crescent Town area, and these two areas most disadvantaged neighborhood in the city. So over the last 2 years, I personally attend a lot of consultation meeting and discussion meeting that what kind of needs is in right now in the city. So all of this, like at least I know that we need a lot of affordable housing, at least 100,000 more, and at least 12,000 more childcare subsidy. We need 100 new space for recreation. And also we need, more services for senior disabilities. And also we need less crowded, more affordable, reliable, and transit. So all of the discussion and recommendation is in here, but we find it out that it is always go in the wait list. Discussion is done and everything is done, but it looks like that we are always waiting to get more funding and more resources for these things, and demand is not meeting by fully in here. I'm talking about the childcare because childcare should be designed for employment support. And childcare is forwarding as a measurement of equal participation of women. And childcare services has made on the whole issue of equality of women that has matched with old labor market situation which has totally collapsed before the way they make it. That if you have a full-time job, you're going to meet the childcare subsidy criteria, you get the childcare subsidy. But right now, because of this precarious labor market situation, it is very hard for the women to meet the childcare subsidy. We are requesting a lot of time. The childcare subsidy criteria has to be changed, selection criteria. And the childcare money always invest with two measurements. One is full funding childcare cost through income tax. Another is full funding childcare cost through the low-income women childcare subsidy. We see that full funding childcare cost through income tax, it is totally fully funded, but low-income childcare subsidy is always underfunded. And we need 12,000 more childcare subsidy. And I sit with the women in our community and discuss with them that what kind of recommendation we should put in this budget. We said that people want full funding for low-income childcare subsidy, and we also want that the selection criteria has to be changed. And other things like we find a new trend, the childcare job, the quality is dragging by the staffing agency. A lot of childcare centers, they are hiring the people from the staffing agency, and this staffing agency make the childcare job is a contract, self-employed kind of woman nanny job. Like they call for childcare worker to come and work when they need it, and it totally drag down the quality of a good job. So that trend has to be stopped. So we are requesting that this could be getting acknowledged, and also the extended hour childcare services. Because right now, most of the job is not 9 to 5. A lot of times people need the childcare in extended hours because of the employment needs. So that has to be concerned, so then women can feel that they can equally participate in the society. On the other things I'm requesting in here, last time also when I came in this budget recommendation, we are requesting that we see the punitive situation of staffing agency. They are grinding the people. And this staffing agency, those who are helping people, or they say helping or recruiting the the temporary worker for the employer, totally are not following any employment standard act. They are violating these rules, but this business is not regulated, bonding by the city. So I don't understand how they do the business in here. They are not following any kind of rules and regulation. So we are requesting that there should be licensing, there should be bonding and regulation for staffing agency, those operating in the city. And cities should finding a way where if employer need the staffing agent, temporary worker, so city should find a way that how through that Toronto Employment Settlement Services project, that how they can supply this temporary worker for employers. So then we don't need to go to the staffing agencies who are making for-profit business in here and squeezing the low-income worker and creating the precarious labor market in here. A lot of recommendations come for the changing workplace situation. I totally see 3 levels of government wants to do something, but nobody wants to touch this staffing agency. Why we need the staffing agency in Toronto? And why not we stopping them to grinding the people? So this is our recommendation, and this is our request, that stop these predatory employment practices that done by the staffing agency, and we are demanding full funding for low-income women childcare subsidy.
Okay,
not 825 position, all 12,000 position. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Councillor Davis has a question.
Thank you, Sultana. I just looked, would you be surprised, just between Ward 35, which is just on the other side of Victoria Park, and Ward 31, this side of Victoria Park, are 2 wards, 31 and 35, which have the highest child population. There's 853 waiting for subsidies. And at the same time, though, the distribution model that takes what we have and distributes them equitably says we should be losing 80 spaces. So the budget has 875 spaces, fee subsidies. That's it.
Yeah.
Funded by the provincial government, 100%. and not included in the budget. Does that make sense to you?
No. I just want to say two things in here, like equity and equality. We want the equity because, people, those who are right now need the help, especially disadvantaged, marginalized immigrant women. I don't know how the division is coming for the childcare. If it's divided by the population, the Tisdale and Crescent Town area, both should have to get more attention because it is totally dense by the children. We did a big presentation for childcare poverty before, and we said that childcare poverty is totally reflected by the women poverty. So women are not able to go work because of this, they are not getting enough opportunity. So we really want that if they get childcare subsidy, they can go forward. Investing in childcare is not in kind. You invest $1, you're going to return $1.7. It is a tested model by Quebec. So we should think it like this way, that how we can invest the money. It's not in kind from the society. So that has to be a concern, that how we can invest the money in a proper way that we can get the profit back.
And the other, clearly, when the city approved its childcare growth strategy last year, it committed to spend 20%, a match, which has historically been our contribution, to match the federal and provincial government's contribution. We should be contributing $11 million. And that commitment is not included in this budget. Do you think Toronto should be keeping its commitment to Toronto families and children?
I'm very disappointed to hear this thing, that you did a commitment and you cannot meet these things. And the commitment is always cancelled for the poor people and vulnerable people and marginalized people, those who cannot stand and talk. This is very disappointing and very shameful situation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your deputation today.
Okay, thank you.
Just before I continue, just want to recognize something I should have done, a couple of hours ago. I want to recognize the local MP, Julie DeBrusen. Okay, is here. MP and Minister responsible for federal government food policy. Is that correct? Do I have that correct?
I'm the food policy chair, not a minister.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Welcome. Okay, so the next name I have on the list is Vasil Alexiou. You had to be ready for it. It's been a long wait. One more. Good afternoon.
Hello. I'm not here to cry or to demand anything. I'd like to give you guys a couple of points. I was downtown worker myself, and back in the mid-60s, we had so much problem, traffic and so on and so forth. So what we recommend, our union and everybody else, we cut down our lunch hour to half an hour, and they coordinate with the schools and the office people downtown how to change the time going to work and coming home. And things improve. Of course, this was 50 years ago. Now the population is getting much bigger, and the problems naturally they're getting bigger. So the young kid was talking about the subway. He never saw other countries how bad the transportation is. We have a good transportation, and my advice was to this kid, take the buses and the subway on different hours. You don't have to go on the rush hour, so different hours. There are very, very sensitive issues in Toronto here, not only now, tomorrow, or yesterday. So there's many, many ways things can be done. About the budget, they can be the money, they're always there. They just have to be worked in a proper way. Such a waste of money, like the bicycle lane in Woodbine, which was useless for the traffic and for everybody else, in side streets, wasting asphalt and money like that. Planting trees also is another waste of time and money. And a lot of these environmental experts, when somebody I see on television holding a piece of stone and say, well, this stone is 30 million years old, and if that son of a gun is closer to me, I'll just slap him right across the face. Who the hell remembers 30 million years ago? Everybody's talking nonsense and nonsense and nonsense. The Democrats, there is no such a thing democracy, there is no such a thing environment. This is all politician man-made stories. I hope you guys can use the money the proper way. Never mind this beggars all the time nonsense. My final thing is my sewer was blocked off, and I waited 48 hours for the poor guys to come in and do the service. Thanks God they came in after 48 hours. And this was emergency. This is what I want to see the money to pump into this. Beautiful people working and serving us. Sidewalks to be blown on time, streets and so on and so forth. Never mind this nonsense talking about environment and other piece of trash. I thank you guys very much. Any questions, Mr.
Well, it's at this point that I usually ask that.
Yep.
Right, okay. Any questions? No. No. Thank you for your deputation. Thank you for coming.
I was going to ask Joe Mahavik, isn't it time to retire yourself, or?
No, we need, Joe's very valuable. He's got a lot of knowledge.
I'm surprised.
I'm waiting until I turn 50.
I'm surprised who votes for a lot of these politicians.
No, that's,
honest to God.
This is a friendly forum.
Surprise.
I'm waiting till I turn 50.
Hey, I stop at 40, so.
Councillor Mahavik is my brother, so he has to stay.
Yeah. All right, thank
I
you.
love you all.
Thank you for your time today. All right, the next name I have is Yvette Roberts. This is the last name before I go back. There's one. Is Tom McLaughlin arrived? Tom McLaughlin is not here, so we won't be hearing from him. So Yvette, we have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Yvette Roberts, and I'm a member of the TTC Writers and the Fair Fare Coalition. But I'm also here today as the coordinator of Young Parents No Fixed Address. I am an advocate for young low-income parents and the agencies across Toronto which support them. I'm here today to call on City Council to fund the Fair Fare Pass in 2018. Transit advocates were shocked to learn that the 2018 preliminary Toronto City budget did not include funding for the widely supported Fare Pass program, which was approved by City Council on December 14th, 2016. The pass also received unanimous support from the Executive Committee earlier in December. The Fare Pass program forms a key part of the city's poverty reduction strategy, which we've heard mentioned many times today, which all of you supported back in 2015. This past December, the City of Toronto itself released a briefing note about the equity impacts of the preliminary budget. The report stated that the Fare Pass will have a positive equity impact and will increase access to city and community services, training, and employment opportunities. Not to mention access to medical and counseling appointments, childcare, food, family, and community events, I might add. That same report, to quote, noted transit exclusion equals social exclusion. Another study mentioned in that report noted that 70% of people who did receive Fare Pass supports in other communities were less likely to miss medical appointments, ripple effect being less accessing of emergency room services and walk-in clinics. Low-income residents who rely almost exclusively on the TTC are waiting for you to take action. Many cities now recognize the importance of transit affordability and are now providing transit discounts to low-income riders. Many of those passes are cheaper than what Toronto has approved for the Fare Pass program. Niagara offers a monthly fare of $50 to low-income riders. Calgary offers a sliding scale program where low-income riders pay between $5.15 to $50 a month. In Hamilton, 75% of low-income pass recipients said that the low-income pass helped them to keep their jobs. There's a ripple effect that's going to show benefits and profit to the city in the long run. Ultimately, the Fair Fare Coalition wants Toronto to provide a $50 Metro Pass to low-income and moderate-income riders and to provide free transit for people receiving social assistance. But what we really want is for the already approved Fare Pass program to be implemented now. Thank you.
Questions? I have a question.
Okay.
I'm going to ask a question I asked earlier today. It's not that I'm not imaginative, but I'm going to ask the same question. If there was 20 to 25 million to spend, would you spend it on the 2-hour transfer, or would you spend it on improving service and frequency of bus service? Bus or streetcar, bus and or streetcar, if you had to make a choice.
I would say to you, in response to that the 2-hour transfer is part of improving services. For that, I want to give you a specific example that sticks with me 15 years later.
You would say the 2-hour transfer.
It's one and the same. Improving transit includes supporting the 2-hour transfer.
So you would that would be your choice rather than adding buses and drivers to the routes.
Not at all. Again, I think we're always being put, do I want to feed the kid in grade 6 or do I want to offer transit? I realize that's the difficult situation you are all in and having to make these difficult decisions.
Transform TO, student nutrition, budgeting's all about choices, right?
Absolutely.
So that's why, you're intimately involved with this file and very passionate about it, obviously.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you, if you had to make a choice, which way would you lean?
So you're talking about either a 2-hour transfer.
You've got 20 to 25 million, which is roughly what the 2-hour transfer is going to cost.
Right.
Would you spend that 25 million on the 2-hour transfer, or would you spend it on adding drivers and buses to streets and streetcar routes?
Well, again, I think it's a very difficult decision, to be made, and I think that given that it's all mentioned within the Toronto Poverty Reduction Strategy.
I thought you might want to, come down one way or the other, but you apparently.
Well, I want to just give you a real life example, and as I say, it sticks with me from many years ago when I grew up on Bain Avenue, went to the, Eastern Commerce and Earl Grey and Pape Avenue School, and my mother still lives on Donlands. I, for many years, lived and worked as a social worker in Scarborough, McCowan 16 bus every day from Warden up to McCowan and Lawrence at Rosalie Hall. Never forget a day. It sticks with me so clearly as I started working on this 15 years later. A mom who I watched with her 2 kids, like I was saying 8 and 4 maybe, estimating age-wise. And I just saw her on the bus. She's taking her kids to school. But as we got to a stop just before Lawrence, I saw her zip their coat up, give them both a kiss, and they got off the bus without her. And I couldn't help because a child welfare worker in me had to go over and just sort of casually talk to her and nicely. And I said, wow, where are your kids headed off to? And she said, school. And I know that school. It was about a block away. They didn't have to cross streets. But she could not afford to get off the bus to take her kids to school and then have to come back and pay another fare for herself to get on that bus.
Sure.
That's why we need 2-hour transfers, and that's just one of gazillion examples I could offer for how it impacts low-income riders.
Councillor Mihevik has a question.
Yes. Do you think it's possible for us to actually ask City Council and the citizens of Toronto to fund additional service, 2-hour transfer, and a reduced fare for low-income Torontonians all at once, the same way we kind of sometimes walk and chew gum at the same time?
When they know that the ultimate effect is that it's going to possibly reduce welfare rates, it will reduce the low-income people themselves who are currently qualifying, the numbers you're using for those costs are going to go down with the fare pass.
Right,
because more people will get jobs, more people will be able to keep those jobs, and more people will be able to access education and health care services.
So it is possible to have many requests of City Council, recognizing that we're a complex city and that we have to work on many fronts to achieve many good public policy objectives.
That's what happens when you're running a city of 3 million plus people.
Thank you. I think I was talking to this guy.
Yeah, to me. Thank you for your deputation.
Thank
you for coming today. So is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward and speak? No one further? All right, so I have a motion that I'll read, that the Budget Subcommittee for Etobicoke, East York, and York Civic Center consultation receive for information the public presentations and communications submitted by members of the public. All in favor? Okay, and that concludes our 3 o'clock session, and then we're back to start in 50 minutes for the 6 o'clock session. Thank you all for coming today and having your say.